In this course, I'll be teaching you all about lighting using the two main render engines available in Blender, which are Cycles and EEVEE. Both have their strengths and weaknesses, and it's good to understand what the main differences are before we actually dive in deeper. So in future lessons, I will cover what Cycles is exactly and what EEVEE is exactly, but in this lesson, we'll just go over the sort of main differences once you change engine at this moment. In Blender here, I'm currently looking at this Cycles scene. Now, Cycles is a path tracing engine, meaning it fires these paths which sort of interact with objects in our scene, return to our camera, which will generate the image as presented on our screen here. Now, as you can see, a lot of Cycles renders contain a bunch of noise, most clearly visible within this glass reflection here, but also in all of these darker parts and in the shadows, you can clearly see that there is noise. Now, noise is an artifact of this render process, and it's the main drawback for Cycles together with lengthy render speeds. So let's just go ahead and render, for example, this shot right here in Cycles and see how long that takes. All right, so the automatic denoiser inside of Blender cleared up this final render quite nicely, but as you can see, this still took roughly 18 seconds to render this one single frame, and you can imagine that using Cycles on, for example, an animation with several thousands or hundreds of frames is going to add up quickly and result in hours, if not days, of rendering. Let's close off this render and let's switch to EEVEE. The first thing you'll notice is that basically this looks like we're losing a lot of quality. Luckily for us, ever since the release of Blender 4.2, which is the main focus for all of the core courses, we have gotten ray tracing. So if we just enable that, immediately we're getting a little bit better of a look. Now, EEVEE is something we call a rasterization engine with currently having ray tracing features. But as you can see, this results in several different options. Now, there is less noise in these renders and they're a lot faster to do. But for example, our shadow quality is way worse. Glass doesn't really work in this case. And overall, the image might look just a little bit less natural than it would be inside of Cycles. However, it is a lot faster. So let's go ahead and render this same frame inside of EEVEE. And there we go. That didn't even take a second. So that's so much faster than Cycles. So it's always this sort of balancing act between trying to achieve realism through Cycles or trying to go for speed in EEVEE. Now, there's a lot that you can do to further improve EEVEE and how things look inside of EEVEE, but we'll cover that in the EEVEE chapter of this course. Overall, though, Cycles, generally speaking, looks more natural, has better light handling, and stuff like ambient occlusion and bounce lighting works just a little bit more like it does in the actual world. However, EEVEE is insanely fast, almost real-time compared to Cycles. Whenever you're working on a project inside of Blender, it's always good to determine if this project is better suited for Cycles or EEVEE. I myself personally tend to always use Cycles just because I like the look and I have a very beefy computer anyways, which can handle Cycles pretty well. However, if you don't, or if the scenario that your project does not necessarily require Cycles, EEVEE is an amazing option, especially with the new ray tracing features available in 4.2. So that's it for this lesson, and let's continue with the next chapter.